Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and you're in for a treat today. Why? Because I'm in for a treat today. And the reason we're both in for treats today is we have with us Robert Meyers. He has 30 plus years in cybersecurity, privacy, M&A security. He's an author and an educator, and I love speaking with other authors. But with that incredibly long-winded introduction, Robert, first of all, thank you for taking the time to visit with us today.
Thank you much.
Robert, could you tell us a little bit about your professional background?
So I started off in IT many, many years ago, over 3 decades. And I came into it after deciding that programming was not for me. Okay. I was always leaning towards the security side. As a kid, I played on that. As an adult, I drove into that. It wasn't really called anything but IT back then. People talk about being in cybersecurity a long time, but the fact is that we didn't have that separation. We were everything. And I saw breaches and impacts from security events that just caused a lot of damage and hurt people. I'll never forget some things that are simple. When I was just a kid, a friend of mine's father had his computer because his son was doing things he shouldn't have. And this was back in the 80s. And he lost all of his work product. And that actually impacted him in real life, not just, hey, I had a computer problem, I had to reboot. No, he actually lost and took damage. And I saw that happen again and again in my professional career. And I've tried to look at that as ways to get around things so we can stop that from happening.
Would the book The Cuckoo's Nest resonate in any way? Because I remember reading that, and a cuckoo lays its eggs in another bird's nest. And
Yep.
there was a big theft in the late 80s or early 90s where they did just that. That was really I bought the book because of the title, because it intrigued me so much. But what you've just described, absolutely, I remember learning about and studying about that in the 90s. So that's been around for a while.
Yeah, there's most events back in the old days were caused by people that were either completely lax in security or were purposely doing damage. They would come in and cause problems, and there was no real reason to. It just happened, and it hurt so many people. So I just got to watch it over and over again, and honestly, I've seen it happen this year. I mean, it's over and over, and I've watched over 30 years of it.
Well, could you bring us maybe forward from the 90s through your professional career in the first part of the century and then up to 2025?
Well, a long time ago, about a little less than 30 years ago, I started working at an insurance company. And when I was there, I really found new levels of, hey, we get things running, but don't really deal with the realities of security. I watched companies that had RAS, remote access systems, set up where, hey, for some reason, the remote access person, which is anybody who logged in as a guest, was now the administrator.
Mm.
And by the way, that wasn't one company. That was half a dozen companies. And these included large school districts and things like that. Then as I moved in from there, I started my own firm, and I was dealing with security events, some of which were really, really bad. But you will just run into things that just are a little scary. People utilizing information they shouldn't. But then you'd have IT people who used to have bumper stickers. You'd know they were IT because it said, "I read your email." That would be the actual bumper sticker. Now I want you to think about that. Does that make you like IT? No. And it really ignored the whole concept of privacy. And in the US, privacy wasn't a real thing. In Europe, it is, and it has been for a very long time. But in the US, our idea of privacy was we're keeping our company's secrets safe. That's different. Data doesn't need that level of security. People do. Now, the people may own the business and therefore they need the security, but we focus it the wrong direction.
Is the data privacy or privacy cybersecurity divide geographic, like GDPR in Europe and the United States, or is it something else?
It's philosophical. I'll give you a simple example. When cybersecurity was just getting started, most of the people came from IT. And an IT person would think, hey, if I have 3 copies of something, I have 1. But now we're looking at protect, protect, protect. Now with the idea that, wait, we shouldn't have some data. Data needs to have a life cycle. I've walked into companies, actually the vast majority of companies, I've dealt with hundreds of companies over the years that have no idea about getting rid of old data. It's just like, well, this is what we do for our business. I actually had one customer once tell me I need to keep all 30 years of email because in e-discovery, they want it all. Well, the reason they want it all is you have 30 years of email.
Wow. Well, how you mentioned a little bit earlier my question about the Europe and EU is their tradition of data privacy and indeed privacy, not just data privacy, obviously because of the war and other political situations that many have grown up with in Europe as opposed to here in the United States. And even in my profession, that's a real thing. How do you help Americans understand what privacy means in Europe through a US lens?
Well, the funny thing about it is, if you go back in history, there's a lot of privacy based law here. There are a lot of things that started in our world in the US that you don't really think about. And that's where we get things like the wiretapping laws. Well, is it okay if you record someone's conversation? That freaks people out. But I can copy all of your emails and chats and you don't have a problem. And then you start getting into the not so much geographic, but the age-based difference. So the younger generations in the US tend to have a different view of security and privacy than older generations. It's very generational based, not just subcultures or cultures, but also generations. So when you're younger, it's like, oh, I don't care what people see what I'm eating, but I don't want my text messages shared or my Instagram or Facebook or iMessenger or whatnot. That's a completely different story. So it's an interesting twist. And so when you try talking to people in the US, you have to get them thinking about what's important to them. What is it that they care about? What do they want to protect? Instead of being generally secure, but with odd openings. Like in Europe, when you have a breach, you're not reaching out to the individuals who were breached. You're reaching out to the government organization to tell them there was a breach. That happens in California. You have to reach out to the actual breached person. It's a different view. Their privacy is very government centric, whereas in the US, it's very personal centric. It's an odd mixture. I mean, CCPA technically is stricter than GDPR.
What we've talked about sort of IT and your role growing up there and how IT has gravitated over towards some of these other areas. What's the role of either senior executives or even the board of directors? Is it to set a broad policy and have someone like you help implement it, or is it something different in this arena?
This is where we run into the biggest problem. When you start getting leadership involved, you start talking about roles and responsibilities. The problem is that we tend to put the role on cybersecurity to handle privacy. but the responsibility goes to legal. I was at an ISACA event once, and I think there were 4 CISOs, and they were all asked about what they had to do for privacy. And they went well into it. I have to do this. I have teams that have to learn to figure out this. And their pain points were interesting because their pain points were, one, they did not actually own privacy. So they had no true authority, no budget, anything like that. It was just layered on top of cybersecurity. The owner was the legal department in all 4 cases. So there wasn't a lot of communication going through. So what you ended up happening was you had people who weren't trained in it, who had no background in it, had to create and enact when legal owned it, but didn't really get involved in that. There needs to be a steering committee in most cases that has both cybersecurity and legal teams working together. And it needs to be diverse because people look at things with different viewpoints. Have some younger people, have people from different backgrounds, have them all in that committee so you can actually create policies that make sense. And always remember, is there a reason I have the data I'm protecting? Because if I don't, then let's get rid of that first.
That's actually the clearest explanation of this issue I think I've ever received. Well done. When you sit down with a company, who are you talking to? Are you talking to the head of IT? Are you talking to the general counsel? Are you talking to the chief compliance officer? Or are you talking to the CEO, COO? Are you talking to the board? All of the above, none of the above. Who generally will bring you in, or does it just depend on the assignment?
Usually when I go in to talk to people, it's going to be either a company administrator or it's almost never someone who has anything to do with privacy. I actually had a great conversation at one point when I was working at Microsoft. I met it was a fairly large retail company. I met the general counsel and I said, "What are you doing for privacy?" And he looked at me and he's like, "Who do you work with?" I said, "Microsoft." He goes, "Microsoft says privacy?" Well, yeah, everybody does privacy at some point. That's not an if, ands, or buts. It's everybody's involved, and there are privacy tools of different types. But when we started talking about it, I realized that he had no clue on the security side being involved. And I actually had an insanely simple sales cycle for my company at that point because I got a conversation started with him. He's like, started bringing more and more people in. And I was like, that's what you need to do. You need to get security. You have to have legal. You have to have IT operations. You have to get the whole group working together. Because if you're not, it's going to go nowhere, or it's not going to go where you need it.
So how, or rather, you emphasize privacy principles and cybersecurity tools can work together. You've just described, I think, to me, how the cross-functional groups in an organization need to work together. How can we get the tools to align with this type of philosophical approach with the people?
So one of the most simple tools out there, you can do this with a spreadsheet. It's called a risk register. We use it in privacy all the time. GRC, the governance, risk, and compliance teams use it all the time. Cybersecurity is used to more automation, let's say. But they need to start taking that tool and learning to use that tool together, because a risk register for a company needs to have cybersecurity events happening on it as well. Not just theft, risk, legal regulations, but actual cybersecurity, so that cybersecurity is looking and go, hey, does this have, this has privacy and cybersecurity impact. Then they can get the teams working together. They get the two groups working together and say, okay, this is great. I'm moving in the right direction. But then there's newer cybersecurity tools. Like there's a company out there that's caught my attention. It's called Lightbeam. Lightbeam AI. They're a DSPM tool, data security posture management. And they had a great idea that I just sat there and I was, the founder of the company is talking about it. And I'm like, that's the Holy Grail. And he was kind of surprised I was so enamored with it, but it was normally what a data security posture management tool is. It looks for areas that can be breached, okay, and tries to put those controls in place. But in cybersecurity, there's an old saying, assume breach. Breaches will happen. I don't care how good you are, they will happen. Well, his tool said, okay, a breach happened and we've identified where it happened. Great. And the tool was designed to identify the data owners, who was impacted by the breach. Not the users of the company, but who owns the actual data. I just sat there and I'm like, you just made a tool that can save a company millions of dollars and let the right people know they've been breached. Because you know how it really goes is, hey, this company had a breach. Send all 500,000 customers a notification and offer them free credit counseling or whatnot. This says, hey, these 15 people were breached. I can have a real response now, not a generalized response. Joe, your data was lost. Tom, your data was lost, potentially. That changes the whole world. That's a cybersecurity tool working in privacy. Normally, it's the other way around. Privacy tools working in cybersecurity.
I understand you're working on a book around agentic AI, and I wanted to hopefully that's right. Number one and good. Then I wanted to ask if we could turn to that topic. And how do you see autonomous AI systems challenging current privacy and/or security models?
So, agentic AI is interesting because when you create an agent, it changes the rules for AI. Okay, it just changes it. And when you're dealing with privacy data and security data and identity data, it's impacting all three. Okay, identity is who I am to do something. You've got privacy data, things about me I don't want to share. And you've got cybersecurity, which tries to enforce that all. Okay, but with agentic AI, its agents are autonomous. They act without asking. Okay, that's the big issue. The first issue. Then you come in and realize that they obscure accountability because the fact of the matter is most agents are made for agents. They're not made for people. So, for example, I took an introductory class on writing an agent. Okay, great. I made an agent. And then I made 3 agents that it talked to. I only interacted with one, but there were 3 agents out there dealing with data that have to come back to me somehow. So they're obscuring that accountability. And they're utilizing data at prodigious rates. So they're a completely new threat surface that we're not really looking at, that we need to change how we're doing things. And they tend to break privacy by learning too much. So when you tell something to go look and you don't get the guardrails in the right place, it looks in too many places and gets too much data. So this is going to cause us to redefine how we talk about consent and lineage at some point. Technically, it should have happened 5 years ago, but we're always behind on this. I'm just going to tell you. So right now, my book is aimed at becoming a field guide for cybersecurity and privacy when it comes to agentic AI, because we need to rethink how we're doing guardrails. Just that simple.
You are the first person I have visited with over 5,000 podcasts who works at Comic-Con. And I'm going to say the Comic-Con. For those who may not understand what the Comic-Con means, it means San Diego Comic-Con. There's lots of others, but there's only one "the," and that's San Diego. Tell me about that love for Comic-Con.
So I got involved about 40 years ago at Comic-Con, and I've missed one since, and only one. And it's a beautiful thing to go to because there's so much going on, so many different creative people, different ways people are doing things. It reminds you that we're all different, but we're also all having fun. And I started working with the volunteers there. So the group I work with is volunteers that are disabled, not volunteers for disabled, but volunteers who are disabled. Because I will find you a job to do, and the team I work with will find you a job to do if you want to help Comic-Con. I mean, it is actually a nonprofit. It doesn't make a dime. It's there to be for fans, by fans. And it's exciting. Something that I absolutely love. And it's next week, you know?
So what about the energy, the creativity, maybe even the love you feel there is things that you can bring into your professional life to help tell a story about security and privacy?
In a lot of ways, you tell stories like you've read comics or you watch movies. You just take that same type of belief and you have a conversation. You're like, this is how things go. And sometimes I'll do something simple. I'll put in a lab and it'll be characters from comics or movies, just so that people can understand these are what's happening. If you wanted to have a villain, you can have a villain. Here's Lex Luthor logging in and he's going to break in. It lets you have a little fun when you're talking to people and lets you connect. Because the hardest thing to do when you're in cybersecurity or in privacy is to connect to people. Most try to separate and just close in. And you got to connect with people or you can't protect them.
I'm a lawyer by professional background. What would you say to a college student or even perhaps a college grad, someone new to the workplace or someone who's thinking about new to the workplace, about why your profession or cybersecurity and privacy is something they should look at? And if they're still in college, what would you suggest they study to help prepare them? Or do they just need to get out in the IT world?
20 years ago, the answer would have been get out in the IT world. Today, that is not the case. Today, if you're coming from a legal or a privacy background, I'm going to strongly recommend you look into some security-based certs and training to go around it. Whether you get the cert or not, use the training material. So if you're coming from cyber, look into IAPP type certifications, just like Certified Information and Privacy Technologist, CIPT. Great certification. Whether or not you use a cert is irrelevant. Do the training. A lot of it's free or simple books. Read it. If you're coming from the privacy world, look at something like the Certified Data Privacy Solutions Engineer. That's from ISACA. They're going to focus in and bringing that security into language you understand. Play with the other side. Don't just focus in on one. And by the way, I know lots of lawyers who go into IAPP and they search in or focus in on CIPP certifications. So Certified Information Privacy Professional. Those are great. But touch on the security ones. Take and read a book on IT security. Understand that there is a lot of crossover. One of my best friends in the cybersecurity world, one of my best friends outside, he has a Juris Doctorate and he went into IT. I mean, there's a lot of crossover. The key thing here on either side is attention to detail. We need to have that attention to detail to be successful. And just by going into the field, you've already proven you have it.
Could you say a few words about your book, Privacy Snippets for the Cybersecurity Professional?
Sure.
Who that book is aimed for and how you think it's been received?
So it's early on. The key that I'm aiming it at is for people who are on the cybersecurity side who are being tasked with privacy. I'd really like to see more people read it. I even opened it up on Kindle Unlimited just because I want people who are in that world to go in, look at what they can learn, look at how things translate. And, I'd like some privacy people to look at it to understand where security is coming from. Because cybersecurity people, they use different terms, sometimes very similar, but it doesn't always mean the same thing.
Robert, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But if our listeners wanted to connect with you, find out more information about the book, perhaps find out about your upcoming speaking engagements, or find out more about your service offerings, what would be the best place or places for them to go?
I would recommend either LinkedIn or drop into Amazon, and I have an author's page. As I add books, they will be popping up there.
Robert, I want to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me, and I hope we can continue this conversation.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Tom.
Compliance Podcast Network. Start your mornings with daily compliance news, quick, sharp updates on the top compliance and ethics stories in under 5 minutes every morning in Compliance Podcast Network. Because compliance never sleeps. Need practical advice fast? Check out Compliance Tip of the Day. One actionable idea to level up your program. Short and sweet, every day on Compliance Podcast Network. Got 10 minutes? We've got the week's top 10 stories. 10 for 10 brings you the big compliance headlines. Fast, fun, and focused. Every Saturday on Compliance Podcast Network. And don't miss the Sunday Book Review, where compliance meets culture through must-read books and big ideas every Sunday in Compliance Podcast Network. Whether you're in the office, on a walk, or commuting, stay smart, stay ethical, stay tuned. Only on the Compliance Podcast Network. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.